In the previous lesson, we talked about George Washington and what he was able to accomplish as our nation's first president. In today's lesson, we'll be talking about our second president, John Adams, and the challenges he faced. So John Adams was vice president for 8 years. And after 8 years of being the vice president, he's going to want to be the president. The Federalists chose him to be their candidate. And a candidate is someone who is chosen to run for an office. So right now we have Donald Trump and Joe Biden, who are the candidates running for the presidency. John Adams was there when the Declaration of Independence was written. He was there when we came up with a plan for our government. He also helped with the peace treaty between the United States and Great Britain. Like Washington, he was strongly against any change in the power of the central government. He was also known for being a very stubborn man with strong opinions. And stubborn means he's unlikely to change his mind or be persuaded. The Democratic Republicans chose Thomas Jefferson to run against John Adams. And Thomas Jefferson was the writer of the Declaration of Independence. So when this election happens, it's pretty close. Adams wins, it's 71 to 68. And the way our elections worked back then were much different. Whoever got the most votes was the president, and whoever got the second most votes was the vice president. So imagine you're running for president, and you got someone talking trash on you this entire time, and you beat them, and now they're your vice president, and they have to work with you, or you have to work with them. It would put you in a pretty difficult position. So if you remember, in the last chapter, we talked about France asking us for help in fighting with Great Britain, and Washington decided to stay neutral and not get involved in that. That's going to come back to bite us. So several European countries are going at war when John Adams takes office. And we pledged to stay out, to stay neutral. And the French people, they got mad at that because they had helped us. Now, they didn't help us right away, but they did come to our aid by sending those ships. So they get upset because they feel like we are siding with Great Britain because we're not helping them. So the French people began seizing American ships. So they start capturing our boats. Anytime we were sending stuff over to sell to Great Britain, they were capturing those boats and taking them over. President Adams wants to avoid a war, so he sends a group of people over to France to talk it out and try to work out a deal. What happens is those guys end up getting kidnapped by 3 secret agents and basically held hostage. And they're told that they're not going to be allowed to negotiate for peace unless a ransom is paid. This became known as the XYZ affair. So we send these guys over there for peace and they get kidnapped and we don't get to talk and make a peace agreement. So after they kidnap some of our people, it looks like we're probably going to war. Congress sets up the Department of the Navy because we don't have a whole bunch of ships still. And we are going to need some ships if we're going to battle against the French. During the next 2 years, our Navy fights many battles with the French, and we capture 80 French ships and only lose a handful of our own. So it comes out pretty good for us. So in 1800, the French signed an agreement, and they promised to stop attacking our merchant ships, which are the ones carrying stuff to sell. But they said, we'll stop what we're doing, but we're not paying for all the stuff we stole and destroyed before. A lot of American people thought this made us look weak. They thought that we should punish the French. So John Adams was not a popular president. He was an honest and loyal American, but he had a reputation for being arrogant and narrow-minded. He would not compromise, and he was very, very stubborn. He's someone that you could not convince him he was wrong. So he became pretty unpopular. The newspapers are writing lots of stories about how unpopular he is and how grimy he is. Most of the people moving to America, the immigrants and the foreigners, they chose to join the other team, the Democratic Republicans, and they weren't going to support John Adams. So let's talk about how women's roles are changing during this time. Before the Revolutionary War, most married women, their responsibility was to take care of the homes and basically do what their husbands told them to do. It's not equal like things are today, or more equal. The women had to make pretty much everything you had. There was no Walmart, so if you wanted a new shirt, there's a good chance mom's making it for you. They had to take care of the children. and they had very few legal rights. Most women could not own property. So the women weren't even allowed to own the property that they were working on. A lot of times it get passed down to the oldest male in the family. By the end of the Revolutionary War, a lot of women's roles had changed, and they started wanting some more legal freedoms and protections that they did not have before. So women also started to get a little bit more free time because some of the work started being done by, like, you wouldn't really call them a factory by today's standards, but some things started to be made and done for them, and it freed up a little bit of their time. So it became acceptable for some women to get work outside of the home, but mainly in jobs like teaching and being nurses. After the Revolutionary War, women in New Jersey were allowed to vote, but only if they owned property. And then a couple years later, that right got taken away from them. Okay, so the last little bit coming up is about the Alien and Sedition Acts. The Federalists chose to take action to preserve their control. So John Adams is worried he's going to lose the election, so he starts to wonder, what can I do to make sure I win? So he passes a couple of really strict laws called the Alien and Sedition Acts. Under the Alien Act, immigrants had to wait 14 years before they could become a citizen and vote. So all these people coming to America who weren't going to vote for John Adams, now they got to wait 14 years to vote. And there's a good chance he's not going to be president by that time, so it won't be his problem. Also, immigrants could be deported if they were judged to be dangerous. So if the government thought that you looked like a threat, you could be sent back to your home country. The Sedition Act made it illegal to criticize the president. So, if you know today, we can criticize the president. It happens all the time. If you watch the news is always criticizing the president, whether he deserves it or not. You have the freedom to do that in America. So, back then, if you were criticizing the government and the president, you could pay a fine of up to $5,000 and get 5 years in prison. Now, a lot of people say that violates freedom of speech, and they are really upset that this law got passed. So this makes people furious. The immigrants are afraid they're going to be deported, and people are thinking their freedom of speech is being taken away. So the Democratic Republicans really get people behind them during this election. So Thomas Jefferson and James Madison, when they see these unfair laws that the president passed, they go around and write these things called the Kentucky and Virginia Resolutions. And basically what they mean is they are telling the people that they do not have to follow any laws that violate the Constitution. So they're going around telling people, that law the president passed, yeah, you can ignore that. So imagine the vice president going around telling people not to listen to what the president said. It's going to cause some major problems. So they told all these states, you do not have to follow the Alien and Sedition Acts. They are illegal and unconstitutional. So this next election is coming up, the election 1800. And this one is a little bit more of a competition. The Federalists support John Adams, and John Adams chooses a guy named Charles Pinckney to be his running mate. So John Adams wants to get the most votes, and he wants Charles Pinckney to get second most votes so he can be president with his vice president. Thomas Jefferson, who's a Democratic Republican, he is more appealing to the normal people. For some reason, a lot of regular people can relate to him. Even though he's super rich and owns a bunch of property, a lot of regular people really like Thomas Jefferson. So Thomas Jefferson chooses a guy named Aaron Burr to be his running mate. So Thomas Jefferson wants to win the votes, and he wants Aaron Burr to get the second most votes so he can become president and pick his vice president. So what happens during this election? There ends up being a major problem. So when the election comes up, none of the candidates had enough votes to win. So Thomas Jefferson had 73 votes and Aaron Burr had 73 votes. So it was a tie. And it was a tie between Thomas Jefferson and the guy who wanted to be vice president. So imagine you were going to be vice president, but now you're one vote away from being president. You're going to want to be the president instead. And anytime there is a tie in the election, the House of Representatives has to decide the outcome. And there ends up being a lot of drama around this. Alexander Hamilton, the guy from the last lesson who got our country out of debt, he wants to get his opinion out there because he's got a pretty strong opinion about these candidates. So Alexander Hamilton doesn't really like Thomas Jefferson, but he hates Aaron Burr. And Aaron Burr cannot be trusted. So what happens is Alexander Hamilton goes to the House of Representatives, he talks to them and he says, you know what? We cannot have Aaron Burr be president. We need Thomas Jefferson to be president. And he convinces them that they should support Thomas Jefferson. And the people believe him. So Thomas Jefferson wins the election, and Aaron Burr is pretty bitter about it, and they end up having a duel where he shoots Alexander Hamilton. So after this, Congress passes the 12th Amendment, and the 12th Amendment separates the vote for president and vice president, so you wouldn't necessarily have two competing parties sharing power. So what did the Federalists accomplish? They were the first major political party in our country, and they got quite a bit done. They helped us get the Constitution passed, and they helped us get our country rolling, got us out of debt, and establish ourselves as a real country. But they're going to start to lose their power. Okay, guys, so that's the end of Lesson 3. So open up Google Classroom, go to Chapter 8, Lesson 3 worksheet, and let's get it done.